Hey guys, this video is for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist and part of our mini-series on being married to a Japanese person. So just to clarify again, of course, as with all the how-to videos, they are generalizations based on what is generally the case in Japan. Of course, it's not always true, there are exceptions to it, but what we're talking about is what generally is the case. And because it's generally the case, it's probably going to be what you're going to experience if you go down this path yourself. So we all like to think that our case is an exception and that it's not always the case, and in our case it's different. We all like to believe that, don't we, about things like this, but chances are it's going to be just like this. So today's topic is what's expected of husbands in Japan. So that's been worded very carefully because it's what is expected of Japanese husbands in Japan, but if you become a husband in Japan, it will probably be what will be expected of you, and it will be probably be expected of you by your wife, by your Japanese wife, and by your in-laws, and by your neighbors, and by everybody else that you encounter in your life, your co-workers and everybody else, because of course, as with most cultural things, the culture has expectations of different parts of the society, and these will be the expectations of the husband. Number one, working hard. The end. It really is it, that husbands in Japan are expected to go to work and work really hard and earn the money and bring the money home, and that's pretty much it. And the standard that is the image at the moment, and we're going to make a video about this as a separate topic because it's become a bit of an issue here, but one of the standards here is that a 40-hour week in a lot of countries, if you went to work for 40 hours a week, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that would be acceptable. Unfortunately, in Japan, the standard has sort of become all about overtime and working extra and working hard and that sort of thing. So you really should be disappearing. I mean, the average husband in Japan, depending on what sort of job he has, but the average husband in Japan sort of disappears at 7 o'clock in the morning and comes home at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, Monday to Friday, or 5 days a week, or maybe 6 days a week. Is quite normal. 6 days a week is very normal in Japan, and that's sort of it, really. And the result of that is that there's a phenomenon recently, or a social thing recently, where they call it overtime orphans. There's a name for it in Japanese that they've been talking about it recently, and that's husbands that hide, husbands who finish work on time, and because they finished work on time, in a lot of cultures, if we finished work on time, we'd be hurrying home to spend time with our family, and you'd walk in the door and the wife and the kids would go, "Oh great, you're home early, isn't that wonderful?" In Japan, however, coming home early would be odd. It would sort of seem that you're not working hard enough, and that would probably be the reaction from the wife. If you came home, it's not very likely it should be saying, "Hey, you're home early, fantastic." It's more likely it should be like, "Why are you home so early?" And she wouldn't be very comfortable with it. It'd sort of bother her a bit. "Why are you home so early?" So what's been happening recently is a lot of Japanese husbands will hide. So they'll finish work on time and go, "Oh geez, can't go home now." So what they'll do is they'll go to the convenience store and they'll sit at or stand at the convenience store at the magazine rack reading the magazines for a couple of hours, or sit in the car outside the convenience store. It's quite common to see guys 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night in their salaryman clothes, sitting there either looking at stroking the iPhone, the smartphone, or watching TV. Most of the cars in Japan have TVs, so they'll be sitting back in the car drinking coffee and watching TV and smoking cigarettes and just sort of killing time until it's sort of late enough to go home where they can look like they've been working hard. So as you can see, this sort of overlaps a couple of other topics we've made videos about, one including image, reality image and illusion, and this is definitely a big part of this, is you know, you have to give the image, the impression that you're working really, really hard. And that's sort of the standard here. And because that's the standard, and whether it's true or not, I mean, quite often it's just not true. Quite often it's just an illusion. A lot of what people do here with work and study and that sort of thing is really giving the impression that they're working really hard. And quite often it's not true. But that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant. If everybody at work is pretending that they're still working 2 hours after finishing time, you have to stay at work and pretend that you're still working hard 2 hours after finishing time as well. And to a lot of us coming from other cultures, of course, this just seems like an incredible waste of time. And that, you know, for a lot of us, the opportunity to go home on time and spend time with our family would be our main motivation, wouldn't it? Whereas here, chances are, you know, you're not going to be welcome when you come running in the door. It's sort of like you're sort of in the way because they've got the routine. If you can imagine, it's sort of similar to what a lot of other cultures were like in the 50s. So in the old style family, with the husband goes to work and works hard and the wife stays home with an apron on and works in the kitchen. And that's quite often the case here. That's generally the case for families in Japan. That's usually the way it is. And even if the wives have careers of their own or have part-time jobs or whatever, usually they have to do that and do the domestic stuff as well, because that's just sort of expected of them. So, and the next video is going to be about the expectations on wives, but because of that, the home is really the wife's domain, the mother's domain in the family, or the wife, even if there's no kids yet, it's the wife's domain. So she runs the house in Japan. Usually the wife runs the house, and so if you turn up home on time or comparatively early to what you normally come home, you're just going to be seen as in the way, because she's got her routine and the things that she does with the kids and everything else, and you walk in the door and it's like, what are you doing home early? You know, no overtime today, and you're sort of in the way. You're not going to be really greeted with open arms. So that's number one. You've got to work really hard, and then usually the way it works, the dynamics of most families here is the husband brings home the income and gives it to the wife, and then the wife administers it. And this is really common. The husband might be given, you know, $100 for the month or something to buy his lunch with or beer with or whatever he's going to buy it with, and then usually the wives control the money. They put it in the bank account and they pay the bills and they do run the domestic part of the goings on. So, and that's really common too. I mean, again, this is not always the case, but it's really, really common. If you speak to Japanese families here, husbands and wives here, this is what you'll be hearing. This is really, really common. So you've got to be comfortable with that as well. And any sort of innovation when it comes to that, or any sort of different thinking about it, you know, everybody pretty much does things the same way here. You know, the wife gets the money and she puts some in a bank account for savings and pays the bills and the rest of it. If you've got some sort of innovative, creative idea of how to administer your money, you're going to have to get past that, because it's going to be really hard to get it across, because in that Japanese person's world, everybody around them has lived that way. Usually their mothers have done the same thing, and quite often the fathers or the husbands have professional jobs and all sorts of things like that, but still the wife runs the house and runs the budget and runs the money. And everybody in their life has been like that. Their own parents were like that, and their aunts and their uncles are like that, and their neighbours are like that, and that's normal. And if you suggest something different, it just sort of seems odd. Oh, that's a strange, different idea, you know? So, and then if the wife does have a part-time job or a full-time job and some sort of career, usually the way it works is whatever money she earns is her money. So your money is her money. So your money usually will be controlled by her, and her money will be controlled by her, and that's usually her money. And usually the way they see that part-time money or even the full-time money is usually just for her to spend on whatever she likes. And not always the case, but some Japanese ladies are big spenders when it comes to consumables, and and just spending money on clothes and bags and makeup and things. So it's a sort of an interesting combination. Some of you might recognise some of these things from your own societies or your own cultures, you know, back in the 50s, but with a couple of little changes to it, sort of highly relevant changes. So, and that's pretty much it. And then other than that, as far as the day-to-day life of living and having a family and that sort of thing, really you'll be just expected to go along with whatever's going on. So you'll be told, you know, Saturday there's this event happening and we're all going to this event, or Sunday this event. Quite often, lots of things actually don't involve the husbands, and husbands aren't sort of expected to be there. And in actual fact, taking time off work to be there for kids' events and things isn't real common either, because it's sort of like odd. If you turn up with your wife at an event at a school, it can be considered a bit odd, like, why isn't he at work? You know, why isn't he at work? All the mothers are there, and then here's this husband here, what's he doing here? And why isn't he at work? So, and then events where you are expected to be there, you'll just be told there's an event on Sunday and you have to be there and you have to wear your suit and you sort of have to go there. So, and that's pretty much it. There's not really, as far as the things that in other societies we value, that you might think being the husband in the relationship, you know, being romantic or whatever other things that you might think in other societies you might think make a good husband, they're usually not relevant. They're usually not relevant. And when you hear Japanese wives talk about husbands here, usually the first thing they say is he works hard. You know, he works hard and he's kind is usually what they say. And kind just means that you're not aggressive. You're not, you know, you're fairly sort of quiet in your opinions and you're kind. Usually is what that means. So, and that's it. That's usually it. If you ask pretty much any Japanese lady what she's looking for in a husband or what she found in a husband, that's usually what they say. A hard worker who's kind. That's usually the end of it. You know, does he make you laugh? Oh, not really. You know, not really. That's about it. So the two things that are difficult about that is that the things that you don't think are necessarily important to having a good family. I mean, you might think if you're earning enough money that you don't need to do all that overtime, and it could well be the case, but you still be expected to do it just so that you give the impression of working hard, because that's the important part. With a lot of Japanese stuff, it's not really about the result, it's about how you go about getting there. So it doesn't really matter if you're earning enough money in your 40-hour week. You're expected to look like you're working really hard. That's the most important thing. So half of it is going to be the things that are considered important for you to do, you may not think are important, which is going to make it difficult for you to do it. The other half is that the things that you think are important in a relationship might not be valued here at all. So if you do kind, generous, romantic things, or you do some sort of thing that you consider is a good thing, come home early to play with the kids or something like that, you might think that that makes you a good husband and that makes you a good father, but it might just be considered that you're just in the way because she already had a plan and you just come home and got underfoot. And that can be frustrating too, because you're doing things that you think are really, really good and really, really worthwhile, and they're just not valued at all. And the things that you don't think are worthwhile are considered to be important, and you have to do them. Which is sort of pretty much life in Japan, but as a single person in Japan, sort of, you know, it can be like that. But as a married person, it's obviously a lot more important because you're having a relationship with someone whose values are probably going to be different to yours. What they think's important and what you think is. And what's not. Anyway, there it was. The next one's going to be about being a wife in Japan. Will be the other side of the coin. Hopefully someone found that interesting. More videos coming soon.